Tonight's guest in the Honky Tonk Time Machine has racked up the awards and accolades over the years. He's a CMA, ACM, and Grammy award-winning country music singer and songwriter. He won the CMA Horizon Award in 1996, and he was the ACM's Best New Male Vocalist that same year. One of the all-time great voices in country music, Bryan White. Bryan, thanks so much for taking some time with me this evening.
Thank you, Glenn. Thanks for your time, and thanks for letting me be a part of this. I'm grateful.
Well, we're glad to have you. In 1996, I'm sure that was a fun year getting those awards, but I want to start a couple years before that. You get your first pair of number one hits in 95, but it was 1994 when you broke through and got some songs on the radio, right?
Yeah, that's when I, recorded my first album, and then soon after that, not sometime in 95, my first album was released. Yeah. So seems like yesterday sometimes, and then sometimes it seems like a long time ago. Just depends on what day it is, I guess.
1995. Hard to believe it's already been 25 years, but that was kind of the big year. And I want to get into the songs, kind of get some stories behind the songs. But first, I want to get to know Bryan White a little bit. I know you were born in Oklahoma, grew up in Oklahoma City. What is it about Oklahoma that all these mega country stars are coming from there? Whether it's Garth Brooks, Carrie Underwood, Blake Shelton, Reba McEntire, Vince Gill, seems to be just a mecca.
I'll give you my answer, and then I got to give you Vince Gill's answer because it's a lot funnier. But my answer is, there's a long-standing heritage of country music in Oklahoma. There's just people love it there. It's the kind of the music of the heartland, and I feel like I grew up in the heartland, and just hard work and salt of the earth people, and that's the kind of music that a lot of people there relate to. And I as far as where all the musicians and singers come from, I guess like anybody, that's just back in the day, a lot of people just they realized that they had a natural talent and they loved music, and they like me, grabbed their stuff, threw it in the car, and took off because they loved it and they wanted to sing. And I can't imagine how many people from Oklahoma probably made a really good run at it and never saw the light of day, but can sing circles around most of us. So it's I think it's just it's the music of the heartland, and people just love it there, and probably more than most people, Oklahoma just gravitates towards country music a lot. And I'll give you Vince Gill's answer. It was the night I won my my first CMA award, and Vince won, I think, male vocalist or one of those. And we were backstage doing some press, and they asked him. Well, they asked both of us the same question, and I reluctantly. Did not answer because there's no way to top what he said. It was way too classic. So he said, well, there's nothing else to do there. And everybody just, laughed, and so pretty funny stuff. He's a pretty witty guy.
Well, we're here in Southeast Missouri. We can relate.
Oh, that's awesome. Awesome.
And in your situation, you come from a musical family, so I'm sure it was instilled in you at a pretty early age.
I did. My dad and my mom were both musicians, and unlike a lot of people, they put my brother and I through school, playing music, playing, barn dances and clubs and private parties and corporate shows, and traveling sometimes out of state. They traveled statewide, but every now and then they'd find themselves in Arkansas or Kansas or Texas or wherever they needed to be. So I did get it honest. And even going back a few years before them, my great-grandmother was a square dance caller, and she made some records when she was young. And then I had my grandmother on my mom's side was a songwriter, and one of the songs that actually got my foot in the door in Nashville was a song that we actually wrote together, which is crazy. A song that I wrote with my grandma, knocked one of the doors open. So it's kind of crazy.
Did that song end up being released?
No, it was never released. There was a brief moment where we were going to try to find the master and maybe sort of paint around it and in hopes of maybe making something happen with it, and it just never came to fruition. But I still have it though.
That's awesome. So it kind of sounds like you always knew this was going to be your path. Am I right? Or did you ever think you might go in a different direction?
Well, like I presume that, when you grow up in a household with, like say you've got a dad that's an accountant,
Right.
there's a pretty good percentage, there's a pretty good chance that, that you may end up going that route with your profession or whatever, a sports dad or, things like that. And usually that apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. And so I think that was the same with me. I kind of messed around with music and played drums quite a bit up until, and even kind of sang a little bit, kind of in the closet. I didn't really let anybody know I sang. But I'd say from the age of probably 14 to, 14 on, that's when I knew exactly what I wanted to do. There was just a few things that sort of happened that were very defining in my life musically, and I just went, okay, there it is. The light bulb went off, and I just kind of, from that day forward, I was, just fixed on making something happen,
Now, outside of your family, what would you say your biggest influence was musically? Like, who did you listen to and kind of aspire to be like?
Yeah. Outside of my family, it's a hands down. Steve Wariner was my musical hero as a kid, and still to this day is still the most influential on me musically. He's a tremendous guy and a great friend too. But Steve was by far, out of all the influences I had, he was the one that had the biggest impact on me.
I can definitely see that. And it's not just the similarities in the voices either, but you can definitely hear his influence in your songs. That's pretty cool. So you said you're friends with Steve then? You guys still stay in touch?
I do. I consider myself very fortunate because, it's, I know it sounds very storybookish, but I would have never thought in a million years I would have, gotten to work with Steve and write songs with him and much less become friends. And so, but I can honestly say he is one of my best friends, and he's just a tremendous guy. And it's been really awesome being able to do so many things over the years, together.
That's awesome. And what I try to do is I try to maybe play a song or two from our guest's influence. So if I had to pick a Steve Wariner song to play, what would you recommend?
Oh man, well, there's so many of them. It's hard to choose. I'll shoot from the hip. I'll just go right off the top of my head. I'll just say, I Should Be With You.
Can't go wrong with that. And if I'm shooting from the hip, I'd probably say Some Fools Never Learn.
Oh, yeah.
They're all great. You can't go wrong with any of them.
Yeah, it's tough to pick a bad one. You can't find a bad one anywhere.
And Life's Highway. I love that one, too.
Oh, me too. Yeah, Roger Murrah wrote that.
Very cool. Well, we're going to play some Steve tonight. Going back to you, though, you start breaking through there in 1994, a couple of songs out on the radio. How did that break happen?
Well, absolutely, and I love the opportunity to share some of this because it gives me a chance to talk about the people that really helped me. So there was a guy named Billy Joe Walker Jr. I know that's a long name, Billy Joe Walker Jr. Billy was a renowned session guitar player. He played on everybody's records from Glenn Campbell to the Beach Boys to all the Hank Jr. records to Reba. Anything you heard on the radio, country-wise, in the 80s and most of the 90s, he was either playing acoustic or electric guitar on them. And then he's a guy from Midland, Odessa, Texas. And a friend of mine, actually a friend of my dad's, who is a guitar player in Oklahoma City, where I'm from, that's kind of where the connection came from. And I sent Billy a few demos that I had recorded in Oklahoma City that were just kind of the beginning of me trying to figure out, how to work in the studio and how to write and all that. And he heard my voice and contacted me, and, one thing led to another. And as soon as I, graduated from high school, I, ended up in Nashville as quick as I could and could get there. And Billy took me under his wing and started kind of developing me and, spending his own dime, trying to get something together that was pitchable. And, I stayed with Billy and his wife. And, it's so great to have somebody that believes in you, So it was so great to have a champion back then because a lot of people wonder how do I get to Nashville? How do I do this thing? And it's, ultimately you have to just bite the bullet and go, but it sure does help to have somebody in your corner, and Billy was the guy that believed in me and believed that I could, had everything to, all the what I needed to have success in this business, and it just happened to work out. He took me to several places, and we ultimately landed in the right place. And so I'd say that was I think it was 1992 when I moved to Nashville, and so you just have to. It's kind of I think back then I was so young. I think I was sort of. It was sort of a combination of feeling like you're invincible and then being stupid. So just kind of blind faith. I knew somehow inherently I needed to be in Nashville and was meant to be in Nashville, but it sure did help to have people like Billy in my corner to sort of help me ride in on that.
So it took a couple of years then from the time you moved there to get the ball rolling, you get your first single out on the radio in 94. What was that 2-year period like? Was it a struggle? Were you doing okay?
Well, honestly, I have to say, if it weren't for my grandparents, my family, and them sort of helping me for a little while, it would have been more of a struggle for sure. So I'm grateful for that. What I did for a living until I started actually working and going out and playing clubs and stuff, which, it took a while to start actually making money, but I sang demos for publishers and for songwriters, and I was fortunate enough to kind of develop a rapport in that 2-year period. And so, it wasn't uncommon to have, 5 or 6 phone calls a week saying, hey, so-and-so told me you'd be great for this session. Would love to have you sing a couple of songs for me, and then I'd have to just basically go swing by the publisher, grab the cassette, that's really dating me there, but I'd go by and pick up the cassette with the lyric sheet, and then, I'd probably knock out 5 to 10 demos a week at, $40-50 a pop, and that's kind of how I made a living until I got hooked up with Glenn Campbell's camp, and I met a few people that ultimately led to Glenn hearing my voice, and Glenn signed me to a publishing deal at his publishing company, and then I started to write there, and so I was really fortunate. I mean, obviously I didn't have a ton of money. It was definitely a ramen noodles diet for sure for that couple of years, but I was fortunate to be busy and to become busier and busier as the years went by. So